Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Now that the dominoes are falling for fights like Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder 3, Anthony Joshua and Oleksander Uysk, what happens for Joe Joyce? The man who was coming off such buzz from beating Daniel Dubois, stopping him in that fight, ending quite a bit of hype with Dubois. Seemingly the world was his oyster. And then he was ordered to face Oleksander Uysk for the WBO interim championship, and it's just never happened. And as we know, Usyk is going to be fighting Joshua now. He was waiting to see what happened with Undisputed, and Usyk was Johnny on the spot when it fell over. But what about Joyce? What does Joyce do now? Because, yeah, I mean, that was a good fight for him, and obviously it was going to be for a piece of the heavyweight championship, the interim WBO title. I mean, Joe Joyce here, see you on screen, posting to social media, looking forward to my next fight, hashtag the Juggernaut. The question is, what is that? What does that look like? Who against? There's just zero detail. Let's start with the WBO, because when you look at the rankings, I mean, are they actually going to honor that WBO interim shot and go, okay, well, Usyk's out of the picture, we're still going to run that? Or because Usyk was the mandatory, will they just not bother? But if they did, just, for argument's sake, if they did, what does that look like? So Joyce is the number 2 in the WBO at the moment. I guess if they were to have it, would they logically go down the order? Would it be offered to Joseph Parker? I think Joe Joyce, Joseph Parker, that's a good fight. Joseph Parker currently off contract with Matchroom, so there wouldn't be the barriers to having that. And I guess another option within the WBO top 15 that might sort of seem like it's from left field, but Charles Martin's just entered the rankings at number 10, out of nowhere. And on Twitter, I was sort of ruminating about, well, what does that mean? I mean, sometimes these things can lead to fights. Is he going to have a fight against the likes of Ali Erendemiresian, or was there a Frank Sanchez fight for someone like Charles Martin there? And then someone said, well, what about Joyce? That would make some sense. And I think it does. Charles Martin, Joe Joyce, I wouldn't mind seeing it. So that's just one thing to consider. And I guess we'll have to wait and see what sort of shakes down with the WBO. Will they sort of have a make good for Joe Joyce on this interim title shot? Probably not, but I mean, it's boxing. It's sort of stranger than fiction sometimes. And given it's been the pandemic, there's been fewer fights, fewer championship fights. I'm sure that the WBO will want to sort of claw back a little bit of cash. So possibly it could happen. But he is the EBU champion, and on the EBU website, see here on screen. And this was from a little while ago. Joe Joyce in a private negotiation period with Marco Huck. So perhaps if, things don't work out elsewhere, this could end up being a bit of a, high-level stay busy. I think Joe Joyce at this point beats Marco Huck and handily enough. Huck is effectively, well past prime now. So this hasn't been updated for some time on the EBU website, so potentially it could be out of date by now. But it was something that was being talked about, and obviously the EBU was discussing it, that they could have a negotiation period for a fight. So perhaps that could happen. And in the scheme of things, I think that's okay for now, and obviously he could have that fight, get the win, build from it. Remembering as well, Joe Joyce is currently the British heavyweight champion. So there is options on that front as well. So he hasn't been ordered to face anyone. But, what about, Frank Warren, who does promote Joe Joyce, also has Nathan Gorman in his stable. Nathan Gorman just put in probably one of his best performances in some considerable time against Pavel Sauer. I think maybe that could be a good sort of fight for now. Gorman, coming off a Dubois loss a couple of years ago, has been working his way back, has been looking better, and probably the best we've seen in his last fight. That could be something that could hold Joyce for right now, because he would be the favourite, and I would pick him to beat Nathan Gorman, but it would be an opportunity for Gorman and an opportunity for Joyce to defend his title, which he did win against Daniel Dubois. I guess if we go to the WBC rankings, He's ranked highly here, and you see that name again, Joseph Parker just above him. You've got Michael Hunter, Alexander Povetkin below. Probably those two unlikely, but what about number 4, Luis Ortiz? We do have history there between Joyce and Ortiz. That was a fight that Sam Jones, Joe Joyce's manager, really liked for Joe Joyce when Joyce was with Abel Sanchez. And it sort of ended up falling over because you may recall there was, a bit of chat online. They even had a photograph, see here on screen, together at a fight. And then Sanchez said publicly, no, we're not going to have that fight. Joyce is sort of 2 or 3 fights away from that. So that kind of killed the buzz and any real talk of that fight and just made it look like they were calling out Ortiz for hype. Not sure Sanchez really realized that he was torpedoing sort of what was a building story with that fight. But Luis Ortiz, Joe Joyce, I think Joyce, he's had those 2 or 3 fights now, so I think that would be a good fight for him, and a lot of people would want to see it. And it's far more than a stay busy. Luis Ortiz, a very dangerous southpaw. Joe Joyce from the amateurs, he was hurt and dropped in some fights. We've seen against Bryant Jennings, he can be vulnerable too to the body. But I do think that his style against Luis Ortiz would actually make for a fan-friendly fight. I think that would be quite a good one. In terms of elsewhere, the IBF rankings, he's also ranked. So in 3 of the 4 sanctioning bodies, he's got good rankings. Not ranked in the WBA, and probably that's a good thing. So previously, he'd been the WBA gold champion, but it didn't mean anything. Didn't lead him anywhere. He won that title against Berman Stavern at the start of 2019, and effectively, ultimately, they ended up sort of just dropping it and moving on because it didn't do anything for them. But here in the IBF rankings, number 10. And it's all the sort of same familiar names for the most part that are across those other 3 sanctioning bodies. But there is the likes below him, Dempsey McKean, Otto Wallin, Zhang Jilei, Martin Bacoli. Maybe promotional issues sort of scupper a few of those fights, but Joe Joyce versus Otto Wallin. Wallin is with Dimitri Salita, and Salita works with all manner of promoters and broadcasters, so maybe there could be something there. And above as well, Tony Yoka. He is at number 7 here. He's also in some of the other sanctioning bodies. Could that make some sense? Joe Joyce and Tony Yoka, obviously. We know that that they've got history from the Olympics. And Joe Joyce does believe that he did win that fight against him in 2016. And there has been talk from Yoka and Joyce that they'd quite like to fight each other in the pros. And obviously Joyce would like to sort of exact a measure of revenge. So is that a possibility? I don't know. Also Filip Hrgović there, another one of his amateur rivals. Filip Hrgović has just been left in the lurch with Michael Hunter ducking Hrgović to go take an easier fight on Triller against, Mike Wilson. So potentially Hrgović is looking for a dance partner. Joyce is looking for a dance partner. That would be a fantastic fight. And maybe the IBF would, with Joyce being at number 10 there, Hrgović 4, maybe they would go, okay, well, let's have this as the final eliminator. And I'd be really happy with that. Hrgović versus Joyce would be a great fight. So there is options here, but it's just, is any of it going to pan out? Joe Joyce versus Charles Martin, Joe Joyce versus Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce versus Tony Yoka, Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgović, and Joe Joyce versus Otto Wallin. There's a number of good names, but I guess it all comes down to the deal, what's being negotiated, where they're going, or will he have like a high-level stay busy against a Marco Huck to keep the ring rust at bay, because there was that previous negotiation period, which is still listed on the EBU website. He is the European champion. Is he looking to defend that? But seemingly a lot of options, nothing locked in, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on who's Joe Joyce going to fight next. What makes sense? Seemingly lots of avenues to go down. Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.